حضورنا الكرام، والآن يسعدني أن أدعو الأستاذ هاشم مظهر المؤسس الشريك لمؤسسة فريمان روبوتكس لإلقاء محاضرة بعنوان روبوتات القرن ال21 والمملكة. طبعا المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية وأجهزة باللغة الإنجليزية عفوا، والأجهزة متوفرة، أجهزة الترجمة لكم جميعا. شكرا.
So, Doctor ended the last speech from a quote, with a quote from Feynman. So I think this is a very natural progression. I am Hashim, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for having me over here. It's an event of this magnitude is not easy to plan, and they've made it look easy. So thank you very much. I'm especially honored because this is not just the country, but also the city that I was born in. I was born in Riyadh. And it's great to be back over here. So I'll start from the start. Widely regarded as the father of robotics is Al-Jaziri, who was a product of the Arab civilization. And back in the day, Al-Jaziri made robots for the king's courtyard. He also made robots, water and pulley systems. He made automatic door systems. And this was really what people call was the advent of robotics, classical robotics. Fast forward, and if you were born in the 80s and 90s like me, everyone had this belief that robotics would be, basically robots would be something that would take over the world, become our overlords, and probably make us work in coal mines. That hasn't happened yet, and it's also because it's not very easy. Over the last 60 years, we're still trying to figure out how to make robots walk properly. So it's really a science that takes time to evolve. That's the Terminator and RoboCop, and this is basically the pop culture robotics of our era. 20 years later, I think we have started to share our spaces with robots. There's robotic vacuums in your home. The Netflix recommendation engines that you have are also a sort of robot. You have robots greeting you at conferences. You have robots also taking phone calls for you. So we have sort of started to become more and more familiar with the idea of sharing our spaces with robots. This is a very interesting experiment in Japan. It's called the Hana Hotel, and you walk in. There's a robot dinosaur that greets you at the reception. There's a robot concierge that takes you to your room. There's a robot that brings you the newspaper in the morning. So a very interesting concept. I went to TripAdvisor, checked out the ratings. It's quite well rated, actually. But the reviews are quite polarized. Some people love the restaurant, love the hotel. Some people say it's great, but I would never come back. Some people just like the experience of having robots serve them. And some people are downright just creeped out. So I was quite interested in what makes people so creeped out about robots, and I found this very interesting chart. It's called the Uncanny Valley. It was proposed by Mori in 1970, and what it says is that humans are very comfortable when you have robots that are providing you comfort, but they don't really look like robots. As soon as they start looking slightly more familiar, so slightly more human or slightly more animal-like, slightly more familiar, you like them a little more. You like them to a point where they become too familiar, and suddenly you just get turned off. You don't like them anymore. So as soon as a robot looks quite much like you or quite much like something you know that is animate, you don't like it anymore, and you won't accept it. You won't adopt it. Of course, being uncanny is not the only thing that comes in the way of adoption of robots. A television set watching what you're doing at home, watching each member of your family, what they're doing, and showing you advertisements based on your movements in the house and who's watching television is really an issue in privacy. And Dr. Muhammad mentioned this morning that eventually privacy is something that we'll give up and we'll be more afraid about probability. And so privacy is definitely one of the issues over here. The second issue is I love my coffee in the morning, but if my coffee machine gets hacked into and somebody asks me to transfer Bitcoin in the morning at 6 a.m., it's not just frustrating for me, but it's really an issue in security. As soon as our devices become more and more connected, there's an issue in security inside your home. Making the infrastructure to allow for these devices and at the same time making them affordable is also an issue in accessibility. And besides making very high-end devices and getting them to the consumer, I mean, you can buy something that looks very fancy, feels very fancy, but it's really a huge challenge in educating the consumer in adopting these devices. So when I talk about robotics, I really want to go into what I mean when I talk about robotics over here, because the word is used quite vaguely, quite broadly, so to speak. So for me, a robotic system contains the mechanical, the electrical, and the dynamical systems. So we started off with mechanical. There was breakthroughs in electrical engineering. Then there was breakthroughs in electronics, microelectronics, etc. Then the next is the layer of software. So given you have all these sensors and electromechanical devices, you have a layer which you can control via software. This is where even machine learning and artificial intelligence start coming into your robotics devices. The third layer is that you have many robots, or you have many different robots or the same type of many robots, and you ask them to collectively perform a task. This is swarm action, and obviously you're trying to perform a certain process, so it also delves into process optimization. And with the advent of more connectivity, the cloud, you now have borderless connectivity, so you don't just have robots in one factory working together, you have robots across various factories together, for example, trying to produce an iPhone. And this is what really a modern warehouse looks like. And this is not something of the future, this is something happening today. You have robots walking around, not walking, but you have robots driving around with barcode scanners doing real-time inventory management. You have robots taking products from point A to point B, taking them to various machines which need a raw inventory. Dimitar has a very interesting talk tomorrow, and he will talk about how, especially for the entrepreneurs in the house, how to build these robotic devices in a way that you can also finance them. You can also get financing for that better, the low-risk robotic devices. So interesting talk tomorrow for that. So clearly, one of the first questions when you look at all this automation is, are jobs lost to automation? And I'm a believer that yes, some jobs will be lost to automation, but at the same time, look at this mechanical drafter. Back in the day, he was drafting using his ruler and compasses and all that equipment. That job transformed with the advent of computers and with the advent of computer-aided design software, CAD software. So the job was still there, but the tools and the skill set required to perform the job changed. And today you have stylus-based CAD software. So an interesting study by the Asian Development Bank said that between 2005 and 2015, 135 million jobs were created in lieu of almost 100 million jobs that were lost to automation. So definitely there is a point at which there's a drop in the amount of jobs that there's an increase in the amount of jobs that are lost. But because you have more efficient processes, you have more demand for products, and then you have a larger market and more jobs. So it takes time, but in the short term, yes, it happens that jobs are lost, but the job really gets transformed. An interesting point I want to touch in, I did research in robotics in Asia and in North America. And I noticed a clear distinction between the motivation behind projects in these two countries. And what motivates projects in the US spends a lot of R&D in military spending, and at the same time in consumer robotics. They have a huge consumer, they're one of the largest consumer product not manufacturers, but developers over there. So if you see, most of the robots that come out of the US are either military robots, some amazing research happening there, or they're robots such as the Amazon Prime delivery robot. There's also the Facebook Aquila, which is not a project that's running anymore, but it was a drone that was supposed to be internet access point suspended in the air all across the globe. Quite an ambitious project. There's also the Google Home and the Alexa. Now, very interesting how it happens in, for example, Japan. Japan has a lot of nursing care robots. A lot of research is done over here. And one of the reasons is because they have an inverted population pyramid. There's not enough young people to work in Japan. A lot of the population is getting older, and there's not enough people to take care of them. So you really have a lot of research money going into developing social robots. So these are not just robots helping carry food within hospitals or carrying medical supplies within hospitals. You even have robots talking to the patients. You have robots with expressions talking to the patients, keeping company to the patients. Besides, obviously, manufacturing is huge in Asia. And you also have robots, for example, that exoskeleton from Honda assisting workers in a factory to reduce to basically take off the weight while carrying stuff. So I tried to go over the Vision 2030 document, and I thought maybe I'll leave it at the opportunities in the kingdom for robotics entrepreneurship. There are 4 areas: industry, mining, energy, and logistics. Within the industry, oil and gas, obviously, then you have mining, you have energy, solar cells, and then you have logistics, manufacturing, warehouses, etc. And the great untapped potential over here, if you just think of this, these are just some of the ideas off the top of my head and understanding Saudi society. I just hope to inspire you to think what the Saudi society needs, especially for the entrepreneurs over here. So within logistics, you already have robots that are taking stuff from point A to point B. You have connected factories. So within that, there's a lot of opportunity for connecting sensors to your elevators, to connecting your different robotic devices to your elevators, to your automatic doors. You can really create a whole suite of robotics equipment. Within, for example, the solar industry, so I understand there's also quite an opinion over here about the solar industry given the high temperatures. But also, one of the challenges in the solar industry right now is the amount of dust that accumulates on these solar devices. And there just can never be enough people to clean that dust. So there's already options out there to create solar panel robots. Mining robots, obviously, there's a lot of untapped potential over there. There's a lot of mines that have not been so far explored, and robots provide a safe option for that. Underwater robots, the whole Red Sea. Cost has a lot of interesting programs, and Saudi Aramco is working with their robot called SwimR. But clearly, a lot of opportunity even in the underwater robotics sector. Now, I want to end slightly on an anecdote. This is a pogo stick. I was doing my master's at McGill University in Canada, and this pogo stick was kept in the lab. It was made by Mr. Martin Boyler. It was his PhD project. Martin Boyler left later, and then we didn't really know what he was working on. The concept of this pogo stick was picked up by some thought leader who invited Martin Bueller over. Eventually, it became this robot, the Big Dog. How many of you have seen the Big Dog? There's this, excellent. Well, very nice, quite impressed. And this is what it looks like today. So you've probably seen this in the popular media. That started with a pogo stick. And what it takes really for robotics entrepreneurs, it's not just a vision, but there's a layer in the middle, thought leadership. I just want to ask you, how many of us over here are between the age of 20 to, let's say, 35? Between 20 and 35 years old? How many of us have read the Vision 2030 document or like skimmed through it? Very impressed. You are the thought leaders. You are the guys who will bridge the gap between the practitioners, the professionals who know how to sow the seed, and the visionaries who tell you where the farm should be built, where the forest should be built. You are the guys who need to tell the practitioners exactly which farms to build, where, and how. And this is where I will leave you guys today. And thank you guys again for the time and the slot. Thanks. If there's any questions, is there time for questions? Try to end to accommodate. Is there questions? Yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. I can try in Arabic as well, but you will laugh at it. So. All right, I think there's no questions. So yeah, we'll continue. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mظهر. And now we would like to honor Mr. Mظهر for his wonderful presentation. Thank you.